Good day and welcome to another episode of the Ask DK show. Today I'm joined by Kieron McRae, who is a managing partner at Sirdar. And Sirdar is an amazing company that helps companies grow and scale through effective boards and governance. But let me not say any more because I'm just bungling it. Over to you, Kieron. Please introduce yourself.
So my name is Kieron McRae. I am the managing partner of the Sirdar Group, which is a business primarily focused on corporate governance.
Thank you, Kieron. Welcome today. I'm really excited to be interviewing you. We've worked together for many, many years across many of your different endeavors, and you're working currently at Sirdar. And tell us a little bit about Sirdar. And first, start with what is a Sirdar, because I think that's quite interesting.
Yeah, thanks, Dylan. It's good to be here. Thank you for the opportunity. So Sirdar is, as Sirdar is the name given to a lead guide or the lead Sherpa on a mountain expedition. So when you think about climbing the really big peaks, the Everests, the K2s of the world, most people, in fact, no people attempt that journey on their own. And, perhaps the most famous Sherpa or the individual who made Sherpas famous was Tenzing, Sherpa Tenzing, who summited Everest with Sir Edmund Hillary. And that's what a Sirdar is. And I think importantly, as I just alluded to, he summited with Edmund Hillary. So from our perspective, a Sirdar is not someone who stands at the bottom of the mountain and tells you what to do. They climb with you every step of the way. And that's why you'll find in a lot of our imagery and a lot of the analogies that we use, we make reference to expeditions, to climbing, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the concept of a Sirdar. And as I was actually explaining to somebody the other day, because their client was battling a little bit with something and was actually asking us to do the work for them. And I said, understand, I'm here to help you get the work done. Otherwise, it's like you stay at base camp, send me, the Sherpa, up to the top of the mountain, the Sirdar to the top of the mountain to take photographs and bring them back to you, but you never went there yourself.
If only.
which kind of resonated. It's like, okay, I get it now. You need to help me, not to do the work for me. And I think that's a critically important thing, is that we're here to help our clients, to guide our clients, not necessarily do the work for them.
I think that all comes down to personality. I have a personality that loves to delegate, and I have to always watch that I'm not over-delegating. And I also have a personality that can be very unstructured, very ideation-based. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs can be very unstructured and ideation-based. And then along comes Sirdar and Kieron and his team, and you're pushing structure. And the entrepreneur is chaos and growth and ideas. So how do you work with these family-run businesses, or where you have a very strong person at the lead, or a company that's got a very strong individual? Maybe the founder's still there. It's a fast-growing company. It's doing well, but the founder's actually the problem. The CEO and founder's actually the problem.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I don't think that necessarily they're always the problem. They're just good at what they do.
Yeah.
But I think you find that what happens with a lot of successful businesses, entrepreneurial, family businesses, whatever, is they get to the point where the skills of the founder can't necessarily take them to the next level.
Yeah.
And I've worked with a lot of CEOs. Some CEOs are great at a turnaround strategy, but once it's turned around, need to hand over to somebody else. So I think where we come in and what we do as a business is recognize, and this is a recognition that needs to happen on both sides. The CEO recognizing that in order to take the business to the next step, whatever that might look like, whether it's scaling, whether it's selling, whether it's merging, whatever it is they might not have all of the skills required to do that. And where we as a business come in different parts of our business, is bringing those skills to the table that allows that founder to take the next step. And that's an important mindset to get beyond, because often, there's this perception of, you guys are going to come in and you're going to tell me how to run my business. In fact, no, I'm not going to tell you how to run your business. If I can go back to the analogy, the climbing analogy we were using, is I'm here to perhaps show you that to get up the last part of the mountain, there may be a better route to take that I've done many times, and I can assist you as opposed to you trying to do it on your own.
So it's kind of like AI. AI doesn't do the job for you. It's kind of human augmentation, and you are almost like CEO augmentation, because my gifting very, very strongly lies like this, and I have very big blind spots and I know it. And so would you say that what you do is kind of like an augmentation, where there's a hole, where there's a gap, you fill that in?
Yeah, I think that's true. And bear in mind that that's not necessarily always us as Sirdar. So it depends on what is needed. So in some cases, that might require appointing an independent non-executive director to your board who has those skills. So whilst it might not be Sirdar specifically who does it, one of the services that we offer is we will go and find that person who can sit on your board who has those skills that will augment what you need. That may be one example. Another example might be, well, what you're lacking is sufficient governance in your business, because if there's a potential acquirer out there, one of the things they're going to want to come in and do is a due diligence. And if you don't have certain governance foundations in place to for the due diligence to be done, that is another way that you could augment what you have with what we do. So whilst I suppose with any business, you've got a very defined product offering or list of services, no two businesses are the same. To your point, no two entrepreneurs are exactly the same. So it's very much about understanding that business, understanding that founder, that CEO, that owner, that family, whatever the context may be, and then deciding what the best way is that we can help. So again, and for the lack of being repetitive, exactly as the Sirdar would do on a mountain expedition, they'd assess the fitness of their client. They'd assess whether they need to take 3 days at base camp to acclimatize or 5 days, what pace to determine, what equipment. I think you get the analogy that I'm trying to make there.
So at what point should a company bring a Sirdar in? Like when, is there like a, so much revenue, or you've hit this point, or at what point should a company look at, is my board performing, or, do I need help?
Okay. So there's probably a couple of answers to that. I think one, probably need to recognize that putting a formal board in place does have a cost to it. So you need to recognize that it does come with a financial investment that is required. But let's park that for a moment. Where we do most of our work are predominantly in family-owned or family-held and privately held businesses. If we use the context of a privately held business, a successful entrepreneur grows their business to a point. They recognize, as we just mentioned in our conversation, that if they want to take it to the next level, then the thinking that got them to where they are might not be the thinking required to get them to where they need to be. They don't necessarily want to hire a whole lot of expensive executives and resources in the business, but they'd like to tap into a much broader base of knowledge, insight, perspectives. And that's where establishing a board for your business can be extremely beneficial. Never mind that part of a board's responsibility is to ensure proper governance in the business. So that may be one example of an entrepreneur recognizing, hey, I need help. I want people who have broad business experience, people who have very specific skills, whether that be industry related, or I need to attract external funding. So if I have someone on my board who either has access to that or is a very credible individual who's involved in the business, those may be some examples in a privately held business. They're ready to scale, they want to sell, they're looking for investment, or they're just looking for some help and bigger picture thinking, if I can use that horrible cliche.
So would you say that a company can't grow unless the CEO or the founder recognizes that they are not Superman, Superwoman, can do it all by themselves? And so is that something that you've seen, that the company, when you guys come in, is there a step change? Is it a hockey stick? But when the CEO sort of, they don't step out of the way, but I like what you said, you focus on your giftings. So when the CEO focus on the giftings, you come in, you augment what they lack. And then is there a hockey stick step change that happens, or is it gradual?
Probably in some cases a little bit of both, to be honest. So firstly, let me say, I wouldn't say that a business can't grow unless it has a board in place. What we do know, based on 17 years of being in this business, is that there is a direct correlation between a high-performing board and a high-performing organization. What we do know, based on the clients that we've worked with in the past, is that the more effective the board becomes, the greater the extent the business grows. Now, obviously, there are lots of factors that go into it. So I'm not saying it is the silver bullet, because it isn't necessarily. There are lots of unforeseen circumstances that happen in this world that whether you've got the greatest board or no board wasn't going to make any difference with what happened to businesses in COVID, for example.
Yeah.
But there is no doubt in my mind that where you have a high-performing board, there's a high likelihood you're going to have a high-performing business.
Interesting.
And the ability to take it to the next level.
So if I had to say, name a couple of things that you have noted because you serve on a lot of boards, you actually are actively a board member on a number of your client companies. So what would you say 5 or 4 top things are for business growth? If we say, okay, number 1, we've discussed, have a high-performing, functioning board with good board members. So if that's number 1, what are the other things that you've seen are important for business growth?
So maybe if I can answer the question slightly differently, and you can, if I don't give you the answer you're looking for, we can explore it a little bit more. Having a board is one thing. There are a couple of critical success factors. Having the right people around the boardroom table is critical success factor, probably number one. Too often I find in privately owned businesses, do you have a board? Yes, I do. Who's on your board? Oh, it's myself and a bunch of mates, and we get together once a month or whatever, have beer and biltong in the boardroom and talk shop. So having the right people around the boardroom table, absolutely critical. And we can talk a little bit more about how you do that if we have time, about how you get the right people. Number two, the board must have a very specific rhythm, cadence, and methodology that it applies. So again, you might have the right people around the boardroom table, but if you're not talking about the right things in the board meeting, then you are not going to get to where you want to be. So from our perspective, the methodology that we apply is what we call our governance compass. And that says that in order for a board to be effective, strategy and direction, absolutely critical. Organizational culture, effective leadership, stakeholder engagement, shareholder returns and sustainability, risk and compliance, financial returns, evaluation and improvement. Those 8 factors a board has to focus on during the course of its board calendar. So you're not going to focus on all 8 in every board meeting, but those things need to be addressed over a period of time. And then when it comes to the meeting itself, having a very specific methodology to run the meeting. And unfortunately, too often we confuse methodology of the meeting with you must have an agenda. 2 different things. An agenda is just one part of the methodology. And then the other factor is that it's absolutely critical, and this is especially true in privately held and family held businesses, that there is a separation of what we call the 3 hats. Hat number 1, shareholder. Hat number 2, director. Hat number 3, executive. Now, as you mentioned in the beginning, you and I have known each other for a long time. I know you wear all 3 hats in your business.
Yeah.
And often the greatest difficulty that entrepreneurs and founders have is understanding how those 3 hats are separated. Because if you come into the boardroom and a board meeting and you're not clear of the separation of those 3 hats, that's when you have an ineffective board.
Interesting.
So principle number 1, shareholders are not allowed in the boardroom. They should stay outside the boardroom. It is not their domain. Directors, their place is specifically in the boardroom, and you have a separation between non-executives and executive directors, and then a further separation of independent non-executive directors versus non-executive directors. And we can get into all the jargon if you like. And then your executive. And the important thing for people to realize, or that they need to know, is that as directors in the boardroom, you have a couple of responsibilities. Number 1, you have to act in the best interests of the business, of the company, not in the best interests of the shareholders. And this is often where the confusion comes along. Okay? I'm not saying you must, but it is totally okay to make a decision in the boardroom, in a board meeting as directors, that is good for the business, but it upsets the shareholders. Okay. And too often is go, I know we can't make this decision because the shareholders are going to be upset with us if we do. That's not making decisions in the best interest of the business. So just to maybe close out on the question, it is the board's responsibility to hold the executive responsible or accountable for delivery. And so that has to be an important aspect of every board meeting where effectively the CEO comes to the board and is held accountable for the performance of the business.
Otherwise, it's just a lot of talking and talking and talking. So the executive have to go away and apply everything and make it happen.
Yes. And already you can imagine the confusion that happens when you are the CEO, you're the director, and you're the shareholder. Yeah. It just doesn't work. So
it sounds like this is definitely the recipe for success. So if you don't have a board, you need a board, and you need to, there's a lot of building that needs to happen when you start stepping up into that level. If you do have a board, are they the right people? Are they performing? Is it optimized? Are you following the right structure? Is, all of the things that you've put in place. I can see why you have a full-time job doing this and helping companies, just like I have a full-time job helping companies with marketing. And we have similar processes and approaches. It's a whole world out there. And I don't think a lot of entrepreneurs who are scaling fast potentially are ready to let go of some of the control that they need to let go of. Have you found a situation where you've advised the entrepreneur or the founder and they haven't been willing to listen?
All the time. Well, when I say all the time, so I often categorize clients into, well, if you were to ask me, so what does the ideal client look like, other than the type of business and the size of business and all of that, is that there are three things or three boxes that need to be ticked. First of all, you have to recognize that you need help. Now, in my business, and I'm sure in your business, the reason why you get a call in the first place is because you realize you need help. So that's normally quite an easy thing. I've run into a problem. I don't know how to solve it. I need some help. You Google, you ask for referrals or whatever. You discover, here's Sirdar, here's Shift One. I can ask them for help because I need help. The real challenge is in the second part is, do I actually want the help? In particular, when the answer that I'm getting is not the answer that I really want to hear. Okay. So do I need help? Easy box to tick. Do I really want the help? Especially if it's a little bit contrary to what I think I should be doing. And then the third component is, are you willing to pay for the help? So you got to need the help, you got to want the help, and you have to be willing to pay for it.
Yeah, and willing and able.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I'm not saying that the financial thing, the financial thing is a means to an end. It's a result. It's an outcome. But that middle piece, do you want the help? And that's probably best summarized in a saying or a quote that I read somewhere, and I don't know who to attribute it to. But it said that advice is what you ask for when you already know what the answer is, but you wish you didn't.
Oh, that's very well said. Look, it's the same. It's also something I've learned with time, is that even in the realm of friendships, most of the time when somebody's moaning, they don't actually want advice. They just want to be listened to. And when it comes to marketing, it's funny because I've sometimes, what you said is so spot on, because I've actually just recently, again, I met a prospective CEO from a company, and they opened the conversation by saying, no marketing agency has ever been able to help us to my satisfaction, which I have now come to realize is code for, I don't want a marketing company to succeed. They have this kind of, I don't know if it's related to, I need to be needed and solve all these problems and be seen as the hero, or I don't know what it is, but it's those endeavors have never, ever, ever worked out, where the CEO or whoever it is that I'm dealing with, usually the entrepreneurial founder, has said, nobody's ever been able to help me, but let's see if you guys are different. Oh, well, I don't think actually we're the problem. I think you might be the problem. So, yeah, but I think that's very interesting because it's very similar in our space as well. If people are happy with what they have and they don't realize that it can be done better and be more efficient and lead to more growth, and we can step change them, at the end of the day, we can't actually work with everybody.
Yeah. And I think the thing that you've got to recognize in that is that it's a process, right? You're not going to appoint a board today and see a difference tomorrow necessarily. It's one of those things that takes time. The board needs to settle in. There's a certain amount of change management that needs to occur. There's habits that need to be broken. There's new ways of doing things that need to be experimented with, et cetera, et cetera. So, it's not a point a board today and see a 10% growth in your bottom line tomorrow. Then, I wouldn't attribute that to the board then. That was something else that attributed to that 10% growth. But if you're seeing year-on-year growth and that growth is consistent, then, like I said in the beginning, a high-performing board is correlated to a high-performing organization.
So give me an example of a company that you've helped without naming names.
Helped in what sense?
Well, I want the sexy numbers. Like, you took them from here, they doubled this, they sold for that, they exited at this, they whatever. So something. Well, some of your nice kapow numbers.
Okay, so I, in all honesty, don't have the numbers in front of me here, but there is a board that we've been working on, or that I've been sitting on for the last 4 years in May. Coincidentally started right in the middle of COVID, when everybody else was hiding away, scaling down, trying to survive, et cetera, et cetera. In fact, there's 2 examples of boards that started at exactly the same time. At the time when I joined the board and we implemented the Sirdar process, our turnover was around about 450-500 million rand a year. Last year, we touched on 1.3 billion.
Whoa.
By way of example. The other boards that I was referring to started off as just a South African business with partnerships, if you want to call it that, in 2 other countries. And part of the board process was consolidating those businesses and putting them together. I think we made 250,000 profit in the year that we joined. At the end of the 2020, because we haven't seen the latest financial year, we'd gone to 12 million rand in profit.
What? That's insane.
Now, yes, there's a lot that goes into that, but guiding that business through consolidation, bringing three businesses together, guiding it through that process. The first example I quoted is a family business where the father was the founder, passed away very suddenly. Son took over. He had been in the business, but realized he needed help and he needed assistance. Grew that revenue over the 3-year period, tripled the revenue out of that 3-year period. So, those are examples. In family-owned businesses, going from where a family are literally on the verge of killing each other to getting them to sit down and agree a family constitution and a family charter as to how the business would run, and is now running smoothly and making good money. But you had family members who wouldn't even talk to each other, and it was literally ripping the business apart to just putting some structure in place. But those are some examples off the top of my head, Trevor.
Well, that's not too bad, I'd say. Not too bad. You mentioned the word family businesses quite often. What are some of the challenges that face family businesses that you've encountered?
So the first one, multi-generational family businesses. You often find, and this is especially true into Africa, not just South Africa, but especially in countries like Kenya, for example, which has got a very strong family business culture or family business, where you have the patriarch, first generation, not in all cases, but in many cases, uneducated, started off essentially as a trader, built a highly successful business, but highly unstructured. One of my clients has done exactly that. They have, I think, about 14 different partners in different businesses, and everything done on the handshake. Everything. So managing a business through multi-generations. Generation 2 comes along. Patriarch has built a very successful business. Invariably, that has enabled them to educate their children overseas. Children come back, decide to join the family business, but have very different ideas to the patriarch because they have an MBA or they have a this or they have a that. How do you bridge that gap between generation 2 recognizing that they want to formalize the business, give it the right structure, and scale it in correct business terms, if I can put the term in inverted commas, as opposed to doing everything on a handshake? That's one challenge. Another challenge, sometimes you see this in generation 2 or sometimes 3 or 4, is generation 3 have become so accustomed to living a good life that they're actually not interested in working in the business at all. So succession planning becomes a major challenge because they're simply not interested in working in the business. Or generation 1 start the business, generation 2 help the business realize its actual worth, and generation 3 and 4 erode it and kill it.
That's usually how it goes.
Exactly. So, that's one example, especially in family businesses, formalizing how those businesses are run is one of the major things we do. And, if you think it's tough to get an entrepreneur to change their way of thinking, you try to do it in a family business that is multi-generational, can be very challenging.
And some of the biggest businesses in the world are family businesses, right?
Well, if you think about it, for the most part, every single business started off as a family business.
That's true.
Virtually everyone. It was an individual who had a name and a surname who started that business. And today, some of the largest businesses are still family owned, but not necessarily family run. Waltons, for example, Samsung, Hyundai, are all family businesses. Yes, parts of them may be listed. Pick and Pay, an example closer to home. All examples of family businesses. Every big business today started off as a family business at some stage.
Yeah, and I suppose that's what is at the heartbeat of every entrepreneur, is to leave a legacy that outlasts you and your lifetime, that supports your kids in their lifetime and their kids' kids, and then, extends further. And having, chatted to you, and it seems I think every entrepreneur needs to just put their hand up and say, I can't do this alone, and I need a guide, and I do want to grow, and I want to scale, and I want to do it properly. And the quicker I do that with someone who knows how to do this, a professional, the quicker I'll grow and the more profitable I'll be.
I agree 100%. The reason why people start businesses, generally speaking, is to create multi-generational wealth. Okay. Now, you either build multi-generational wealth by keeping the business in the family, but ensuring that you build in succession and succession in the right way. Or alternatively, you build a business to ultimately sell it and take the proceeds of that and build generational wealth. There are very few entrepreneurs that I've spoken to that when you ask them, so why did you start this? Yeah, of course, it's their passion. It's what they're good at. It's what they like doing, et cetera, et cetera. But you built your business to sell it one day because that's how you realize its value. You only realize, I say only, you only truly realize the value from a business that you built by either selling it or scaling it. That's the only way you realize wealth in a business. Because otherwise, you're just working for a salary for most of your life.
Yeah, just a lifestyle business.
Yeah, and that's a big difference. And we often talk about the difference between a craft business and an enterprise. Okay, a craft business, by definition, is totally reliant on the founder. Okay, it's totally reliant on that individual being there to run it, to keep it going, et cetera, et cetera. And invariably, a craft business dies with the founder. Okay? Creating multi-generational wealth is about creating an enterprise. And when you have an enterprise, you've either sold a portion of it, or you have a succession plan which goes, So you're an entrepreneur. I'll ask you a tough question right now. Do you have a craft business or do you have an enterprise?
Exactly. I think that's the big question, is that do you suffer from I think not a lot of entrepreneurs, but there is something inside of an entrepreneur who wants the business to succeed because of them, and they want all the credit. And I have seen businesses fail because the entrepreneur was stepping away, and subconsciously the entrepreneur didn't want the business to succeed without them, and they almost self-sabotage their own business. But if I come down to the essence of it, it's hire people who are better than you, who have done this before, who know what to do, who are bigger than you, can think bigger than you, and can create something that is beyond yourself. Otherwise, like you said, it's a craft business and it's going to go down when you go down.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Kieron, thank you. It's been absolutely super insightful chatting to you as always. Are there any closing thoughts for the audience before we sign off?
I don't know if I'd call them closing thoughts necessarily, but I think maybe, just leaving it on that point about, are you building a craft or do you want to build an enterprise? If you want to build an enterprise, recognize that there are ways of doing it that are effective. And one of the ways of doing that is considering putting a board in place.
I like it. You've given us a lot to think about. Thank you so much, Kieron. And we will have all your contact details in the descriptions at the bottom when we post this up on social media and on YouTube and podcasting platforms. Once again, to all our listeners and viewers, thank you so much for joining us, and have an awesome day. Thank you, Kieron.
Thanks, Dylan. Great chatting. Thanks for the time.
Thanks, Kieron.